you. And I'm going to jump right in with the usual sound check. Can you all hear me? As far as I can tell, I'm unmuted.
Yes.
You are.
Good. And I'm going to move right into some video. Thank you very much for the introduction. I enjoyed chatting with you already. It's been a wonderful afternoon. In the middle of all of that, I got myself disconnected from Zoom and I reconnected, and then whatever happened, I now have my backdrop, which I hope you can see, of my little puppy friends, and the ARF logo. So there we go. And what I'd like to do is to give you an overview of ARF's operations and functions and where we are. Obviously, we, like everybody else, has had tremendous impact from the pandemic. All of our adoption work is being done virtually, which slows it down considerably. That means we have a drop in numbers in some of our categories that we prize ourselves in, and that is one of the most important. And you'll be happy to hear that we are now approaching 50,000 dogs and cats that have found forever homes through ARF since it opened some 30 years ago. 2021 is the 30-year anniversary of ARF's incorporation as a nonprofit. So it's a big milestone for us but we have had to deal with the pandemic in many ways, as you can imagine. I'm going to try now. There are a couple of moments when I do these presentations, which I call the make or break moments. One is I'm going to do a screen share to put a slideshow on, and then I'm going to start it. And in the middle of the slideshow, if it works right, I actually have a video clip to show you. So let me try that all and see if we can do it. I have to click on share sound here and so on and choose the slideshow, and it will tell me if we have done it. And you're going to tell me if you can see a slide.
Yeah, it's working.
Yes? Okay, that's one hurdle. And by the way, I wanted to compliment you, and some of you who have snappy backgrounds, I hope you will give yourselves an award for Neil's gorgeous beach setting there, which is pretty nice. I presume that is your actual backyard there that we're looking at. It's impressive. But in any case, let me tell you a little bit about ARF. As you know, many of you are out there, if you've been around this community long enough, have heard of ARF. It was obviously founded by Tony and Lorraine LaRussa back in the 90s. And what I'm going to do is sort of walk you through some of that, but more focusing on its mission and its accomplishments and where it's going at present. So let me move on to, that's the front door, so to speak. Our mission has always been two-sided. One of the differences that sets ARF apart from a lot of other shelters, especially the ones that are run by municipalities, most of you like me are old enough to remember when we used to call them the dog pound or whatever it was, the kind of jail for animals that didn't have homes. Pretty grim places. So obviously ARF is different. If you've been there, you know it doesn't look, smell, sound, or any other way seem like it's an animal rescue facility, but it is. 13 years at the top of Charity Navigator's 4-star ratings. Mr. LaRussa doesn't like to make a big deal out of it, but since he is considered a celebrity, they have celebrity-sponsored charities as a category, and for years and years, Tony LaRussa's ARF has been the #1 in the country, according to that independent organization that evaluates nonprofits. We pride ourselves in the fact that it's a big operation. It actually costs more than $10 million a year to run it, and we have raised that. As many nonprofits, about 65 or 70% of our income is in the form of individual donations or bequests from families. And about 85% of the money that we take in goes directly into programs for our animal friends and the people who live with them. So you will see in this slide, people rescuing animals, animals rescuing people has been our mission. Like many, many shelters that call themselves Animal Rescue Foundation, we're pretty much limited to dogs and cats. SPCA and other organizations take every kind of animal you can imagine. and help with their rescues, from horses to llamas to alligators and fish. Koi ponds. Koi ponds are in big trouble in fires. You may not know that. So koi have to be rescued too. But we stick to dogs and cats, and we have been doing that now for 30 some years. Looking at, this is our fiscal year, and it will show you a lot in a few numbers. You'll see that this is we operate on a fiscal year. So from mid-19 to mid-20, you and I and everybody else who has survived knows that things changed from the first half of that period to the second half dramatically. So our numbers are actually smaller. We managed to somehow get 1,886 dogs and cats adopted, but that's down from about 2,500 a year, which is our normal rate. We pride ourselves in sending home on average 40 to 50 dogs and cats every week. And my job, my joyful job, is working at I'm the matchmaker team, helping people who, ranging from those that have never even touched a dog to people who are animal trainers, and somebody, for example, who actually comes looking for dogs to train for search and rescue work and finds that the best ones, as we all know, are usually mutts and not purebreds. In any case, we do a lot of spay-neuter surgeries. And as you can imagine, just like with humans populating the planet, one of the endless problems of animal welfare is overpopulation. So spaying and neutering about 3,000 to 4,000 animals a year saves 2,642 billion, I made that up, but dogs and cats. You imagine over the generations how much that has done in terms of reducing the population of unwanted animals. About 70 to 75 tons of surplus pet food we distribute to people who can't otherwise afford it. I don't suppose many of you in this audience have been on what we used to call food stamps. I don't know what they're called now, but normally you can't get pet food with those. And so a lot of people who otherwise couldn't afford to keep what may be their best friend going, especially in COVID time. COVID time has put people in shelter situations where they can't bring their animals. And so that's created a lot of chaos in the rescue work. The Pets and Vets program is something that we're very proud of. It's a really unique program, and I'm going to be telling you more about it momentarily. So let me jump ahead and give you some more specifics. This is a very, very quick overview of our history, going back to those of you who were A's fans. Remember the Earthquake World Series in '89 when the A's won the World Series after a delay of several days from the earthquake. And in the following year, they were world champions, 1990. And the Yankees came to town. The Yankees obviously were arch rivals and still are for many. And in those days when the Yankees were in town, in the middle of one of the nationally televised games, a cat ran out onto the field and was terrified. Nobody could capture it. It actually delayed national TV live, when we used to do it that way, for about 40 minutes, with the Keystone cops chasing the cat all over. Finally, steering it towards the A's dugout, where you see Tony and the cat at his feet. That in the back of most of you haven't been in the dugout of the A's stadium at the Coliseum, but the dugout has a little office in the back and a restroom for the players to use. And they got the cat into the office. And I can tell you, because I heard it from Mrs. LaRussa, who was on the phone to Tony before the game was over, saying, "Okay, Tony, what are we going to do about the cat?" He begged off and said, could he finish the game first, and then we'll talk about it. But that cat, Evie was named Evie for the Walter Haas's wife, who was the owner at the time. The cat, Evie, was animal number one. This past year, when I left ARF, the numbers of all the animals that have come through there are sequential, and each file number is the next one up. We just now, when I was there at the beginning of the year, before we had to close down a lot of the operations, we were at 45,000. And we're now approaching 50,000 in this pandemic year. So that's kitty number one. Dogs and cats now up to 50,000 that have gone home. And we opened our first shop in the lower left corner the next year when ARF was incorporated at some space that was donated in Concord. And since then developed education programs for kids, summer camps, all kinds of camps for kids in the school break periods when we used to have school. And emergency medical fund that we have where we provide, that's not 911 type emergency, that's financial emergency. So we had animals, there are people who have, and I'll give you a quick example, a woman who lives in a trailer by herself, whose handicap gets around on a walker, and her dog needed surgery, which she couldn't afford. It's her best friend, it's her companion, it's a security system, and it's her pal. And she was able to make application to ARF, and we were able to pick up the dog, do the surgery that it needed, and send it home. That's how the emergency medical fund works. The shelter that we now occupy out there in the northeast corner of Walnut Creek in Shadelands was opened in 2003. And we just now have, in the middle of the COVID, finished a new building, which I'll tell you about in a moment. Saving lives is what we do. Inspiring learning means we want to help people and animals not only get together, but have a good, prosperous, and happy relationship. And so we provide training and teaching of all kinds. And then we have programs where we bring animals into people's lives who are otherwise having a hard time and provide some cheering up. Rescuing is a big part of what we do. We have specially designed trucks like the one in that slide, which are air conditioned and equipped for safe storage of animal kennels. And I can tell you, because I've been on many of these runs, every single time you see a shelter being set up for people that are being evacuated from some of our many catastrophes, I can guarantee you there's people shelters going up, there are animal shelters going on in the background, they just don't get in the news. When people have to flee a fire in the middle of the night, guess what happens to the pets? Some of them get to go, some of them take for the bushes and run, and they never get out of there. And the firefighters will bring animals out burned and injured and otherwise dehydrated and worn out for days and weeks. And up in the parts of the country in California, as you know, where we have wildfires, it isn't just dogs and cats. We have horses, we have llamas, we have koi fish, we have all kinds of critters that need help. So we're doing that. When we bring them, when we rescue animals, the majority of our animals are animals scheduled to be euthanized in public shelters. So unless we have a catastrophe going on, we will make a run to shelters as far north as Tehama County and Shasta area, as far south as I want to say Fresno area, and bring animals from public shelters that are perfectly adoptable, but have the misfortune of just having run out of time because the shelters don't have enough money to keep them alive till they can find a home. So we evaluate their behavior right away. The woman in the middle is doing an evaluation of a new dog in order for us to get an idea of what training they may need as we go forward. And the next stop, I want to actually back it up and say the first stop for every animal that comes to ARF, they don't even get in the door before they're being evaluated for health reasons. Just like with the COVID, you can imagine we have to screen for all kinds of things before the dogs come into the shelter, because just like in our hospitals during COVID, what you want to do is not have an infection break out in your treatment facility. So we have to be very, very scrupulous about the care and health of the animals that come in the door. And if they can't come in the door, they get into our foster families. We have hundreds of our, what I call our unseen heroes at ARF, are the people who take home animals temporarily. And this will include ones that are sort of run-of-the-mill, dogs and cats and so on. But imagine having a newborn orphaned litter of 9 kittens that you're going to foster. That's a true episode going on right now, where that requires bottle feeding 9 kittens every 2 to 4 hours, round the clock. Those are heroes, and they do it until the animals are healthy and well enough to come back to the facility and then be put up for adoption. So animal care, it takes many, many forms, both people helping out with the animals in the facility, litter of puppies there in the lower left, and helping out with them getting prepped to go home. We have a clinic, which is first rate. We have some extraordinarily talented people there who work on the shelter medicine specialty area. And they will do, that includes all kinds of surgeries, sometimes even involving specialists that we will bring in. Quick example, a dog needed to have a hip surgery that's a very specialized kind of surgery. We talked to get on the phone to our friends up at the UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine. The surgeon comes down who does this kind of orthopedic surgery, brings 2 residents. We set up the room, we have the animal prepped and ready to go. They do the surgery, it's a teaching experience for them. They go home without sending us a bill except for their expenses getting there. And the animal has a normal, healthy lifespan instead of being crippled for its life. That's an example of the kind of things that happen. Lower left of this slide, you see the big van there. That is actually a fully equipped veterinary clinic on wheels. It has an operating room in it. It has all the anesthesias and everything and the 24/7 air conditioning needed to keep it in operation. And it is a busy vehicle. They take their vet and their staff and off they go to either emergency situations in catastrophes, or they'll go, for example, to a clinic. A few years back, Antioch Shelter had a fire up there. The animals were safe, but they without having their clinic was closed for a while, we could loan them that facility and have that on wheels. That particular vehicle I use as an example of how our donors help out. That vehicle was entirely paid for by the bequest of one of our a donor that we didn't even know. And this is a true story. So a person comes in with a lawyer and says, my father passed away. He really thought you did great work here and he wants to make a special gift. And this is the result of that gift. One person, this is why we say the donors sometimes are the ones you least expect to show up maybe at the end of their own lives. But that's that particular facility then also goes to the veterinary hospitals where vets who have pets on certain days can have their animals get their physicals and their basic shots and so on while they are while their owners are being treated. Foster care is a big part of what we do. I mentioned it earlier. It's just an extraordinary group of people. The ones we rarely see at ARF, they come in to pick up and take back animals and also to get their supplies, but they also provide often medical care. You see the dog on the right that we wanted to get out of the busy world of shelter in order for this leg surgery to recover fully. So they will take care of our post-surgical patients and also the kittens and the special needs dogs and cats. That those are often people who have veterinary backgrounds and experience who can help us with IV drips and medications and wound treatment and so on. Adoptions is where I spend most of my time. I have a screensaver on my computer. Screensaver has now, I guess I'm somewhere over 700 dogs and cats that I've helped find their forever homes and matched them up. Very touching experiences, as I've said, because some people have just lost a pet of their own. They decide that they're ready to get another one and so on. On that board, you'll see lower right, we call this is the board where we still traditionally write the dogs and cats names that are available for adoption. And as we like to say, it's the only animal care facility where having their name crossed out is good news. Those are the ones that have gone home during an adoption session. Disaster response is something, as you know, I heard you all talking about the uses and abuses of the internet. But in disaster response, obviously shelters are now all linked and in touch with each other. So that, and I'll say a few years ago, when we had a devastating hurricane in Florida, Broward County, Florida, had been on rescue runs to Puerto Rico. They had a whole lot of dogs and cats, and they knew that there was a hurricane coming. They knew they had to clear out. So they get on the internet to the network of all facilities, including ours. Can you take dogs and cats if we can get them to you? We had a plane load of volunteer pilots. Yes, there are Wings of Rescue. Wings of Rescue is a volunteer group of people who are flight qualified and have current and active pilot's licenses for multi-engine aircraft. So what the agencies have to round up the cost of leasing the airplane. They fly the animals, in this case from Broward County to Hayward, California, with a truckload of animals. The middle picture there was taken during that particular rescue operation, where we had dogs and cats being flown in from other places. But that happens a lot when there are shelters that are in situations where they're getting overwhelmed. You and I may not think about this too often, but with hurricanes are sort of unique if you're going to have a disaster, because you can see them coming in ways that you can't with other kinds of disasters. The other extreme being earthquakes, where they happen in a hurry. But when you can see them coming, you can clear space for animals as well as for people and get a head start. Pets and vets, I'm going to tell you more about momentarily. About 10 years ago, when I was doing adoptions, we started a program for veterans who had honorable discharge papers of one kind or another, and we would pay the fees to help them adopt a dog or a cat. That was also provided as a special program by donors who, no surprise, were veterans. And now what's happened is that program has morphed into a program of matching up veterans who are referred from the VA, who have the kinds of emotional situations and problems where they feel that having a companion animal in there, either individually or in their families, would be important to them. So we do a matchup with our veterans who've been referred from the VA for an animal, some of whom will go on to be trained as service dogs. Now these are those, so we make a big distinction, as many of you know, been on airplanes with people with iguanas and one thing and cockatoos and all kinds of things that are emotional support animals. Well, that's not what we do. We have emotional support animals for sure, dogs and cats. And then we'll take them, for example, have a program with PSA where we can take them on through the airport and actually board an aircraft and unboard several times to get practice at being good citizens on an airplane. But we also then, some of those dogs will go on and get the specialized training to be called a true service dog. That program now has its own facility. So let me show you, this is a picture. Then of you have been out to ARF. In the lower right corner of that, I hope you can see 3 circled areas. That's the new building that has gone on during the pandemic. One of the many, we were pouring concrete when the pandemic hit. And we were in that particularly odd situation where we had to continue construction with the new COVID regulations and so on. So that the building that's circled on the left and is highlighted on the very far left is a new program where our Pets and Vets program, it will particularly be operating, and has a training function so that other organizations around the country who would like to do something like this with their veteran populations can come to us and train with us there at that new building which has been built. The other 2 circles identify what we had to do to make the veterans program more manageable, and that is to add some housing for the dogs, and that's what's circled in the middle, and add to our veterinary facility. That's the little circle in the corner where you see. So the Pets and Vets program now is ready to open. They wanted obviously to have a big ribbon cutting and all of that, which has had to be postponed, but the program is now up and running again, and we'll have more to tell you about that in the future. I'm going to try, if I can, to show you a video clip. We'll see if I can bring it up, and then once again, I hope you'll be able to hear it. I have to be sure that, as far as I can tell, I clicked OK for the video. One of you can holler if you can't hear it. I'm going to show you this, and then we'll get on to the next. Music.
When Ethan committed to serve in the military, he risked his physical and emotional well-being to help make the world safer for everyone. His deployments left scars on his body and his mind.
Our midnights at home trudged along as my dad preferred to wait out the hours of the night rather than confront his wartime nightmares. There never seemed to be a day in which my dad's anger did not engulf our home. But your presence changed everything.
After a few months, I realized how much you were comforting my dad when he needed it and making him a happier person.
Ever since he got you, you have made him a more open person, energetic person, active, and you've made him get out of the house more often.
Your wagging tail acts as a warm, calming heartbeat in times of my dad's sudden panic attacks. Your warm belly on top of my dad's trembling feet calms him.
When my dad plays the harmonica, you start barking as though you were singing. And I notice everyone in the room starts smiling.
I don't know how you ended up in a shelter, but I'm so grateful you found us.
My family was a little distant, and you brought us closer.
You are such a wonderful service dog.
I don't know how else to say it. You saved my dad's life. Thank you, Laramie.
Thank you, Katie.
We love you, Katie.
Thank you, Finnegan.
That was something I wanted you to be able to see. Now, can you still hear me? I can't tell.
Yes.
You can. Could you hear the audio in that video?
Yes.
Good. Okay. I'm going to try and close that and get on with the slides if I figure out that particular next step, which is to go back to the slideshow. It's the okay, so the Pet Hug Pack is something, if you've been hospitalized ever, I mean, I was about 10 years ago, I spent some time at 2 weeks at Kaiser in the hospital, and I was visited thanks to my wife who knew about it. The Pet Hug Pack makes hospital visits, meets with special populations and groups, has all kinds of activities. And these are all animals that are certified by their trainers to be manageable with populations that might otherwise be uncomfortable for dogs. Touch them, take a hold of them, pull on their ears, one thing and another. And cats, we even have one miniature horse who's in that group. Haven't had that visit yet, but you'll see that Pet Hug Pack is a very popular group of animals that make visits to hospitals and special education settings and that sort of thing, COVID permitting. Another program that's been hard to manage. The food share program, as I said, 75 tons of pet food that has been distributed to people who otherwise might not be able to afford it. And it's either they can pick it up at ARF or we actually will have some of our volunteers deliver for people who have limited mobility and are housebound. And then our pet safety net, which is helping people find resources. You know, a big one, as I mentioned earlier, this past year has been helping people find places to rent that will accept pets for people who've been displaced and unable to maintain a mortgage and so on. So the safety net is basically a referral and connecting agency for various kinds of services, including the sad situation which we had, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, with people who've had to dial back on their expenses to the point where they couldn't afford to keep their pets. And then our resource center, which is also a sort of a helping people get connected to resources and facilities of all kinds. That again will be where we're moving, or we're bringing somebody in our home who has a medical condition and we're not sure about having animals around them. And so we'll try and provide information and connections for people. And there's a lot more. Some of you will remember our Animals on Broadway program that we're trying to revive. It's hard to do a parade virtually. Any of you may have watched the Rose Parade. You can do it. It just isn't the same, right? And you know how that can be. And then some of you will remember Stars on Broadway, which is a popular program we've had every year for years. at the Lesher Auditorium in Walnut Creek, which has also had to go virtual. Hopefully by this time next year, all of those functions will have been restored. Supporters like you and our community make all the difference. It's a private nonprofit, as I mentioned, and we're very much always interested in people who would like to volunteer. As I did, I won't bore you with the story, except when I was working in Walnut Creek, I came across the ARF van, the adoption van that used to park in Broadway Plaza during the holidays and had dogs and cats that were adoptable during the holidays. And within about 2 years, I was driving that truck. That's how I first got connected, and I still am after all these years. Thank you all for helping us do what we do. ARFlife.org. My dogs are in the background cheering me on. That means that's my security system. I don't need Ring doorbells. I've got my own doorbells. The ARFlife.org is our website where all will be revealed, including our finances and what the salaries people are paid and everything else we can tell you. That's it. I'll take your questions. I'd love to hear from you. Let me see if I can close this. I'm going to stop the screen sharing.
So Paul, are you
Yep,
cover the questions?
Yep, I'm the guy. One of the questions, where do you get your animals? You were talked about animals that are going to be euthanized.
Yes.
But where are they coming from?
Good question. The original mandate, the original source was animals that had run out of time so we were a secondary shelter. Secondary shelter, and by the way, I should tell you there's law involved in this. Most counties require that found animals whose location owners cannot be located, be taken to county facilities so they can sort of keep track of the numbers. And typically what happens is if there's a waiting period, counties will say they'll have anywhere from 7 to 21, 30 days. Animals can be kept for adoption. If they're not adopted, they're euthanized. Thousands and thousands of adoptable animals are euthanized still in California every year. So our mission had always been to connect now, of course, using the internet with shelters. So we make a run to those shelters. They've done some pre-screening for us. We'll send our behavior team and our medical techs to have a look at the animals, bring back as many as we can to our facility. So that was our initial, and that's still the mainstay of our animal supply is shelters where animals have run out of time. The other sources are unique, like when we have disasters, so we'll make a special run to adopt animals from counties or even out of state that are being shipped in because of overwhelmed shelters in other facilities.
What happens when somebody decides they don't want the pet anymore? I mean, do you guys get that?
Well, I'll tell you 2 ways that it works. One is, and it used to happen to me when I was coming in there early in the morning, there's a dog tied to a tree out in front of ARF with a note, "Please take care of my dog." That's one way. That's not the preferred way. We actually have to take those dogs to the county facility because that is what people looking for lost pets are told to do first. Go to the county shelters in your area. So we cannot take animals directly from the public except by prior arrangement. Prior arrangement is one that I have with at least with 4 of my animals. We have 5. They're allowed 2 per person of our donors. If you donate as little as $1 a year to ARF, you can make an arrangement with ARF so that if you have animals in your home that if you're unable to care for them any longer for one reason or another, and you don't have any backup in your family, the animals can be brought to ARF for adoption by prior arrangement. And we do that in part to help people like some of us who are saying, okay, I'm 75, 80 years old. I'd love to have a dog or a cat. I just don't know if I'm going to outlast the dog or the cat. And I don't have family in the immediate area to help me with that. So I can make an arrangement with ARF for an animal that I could no longer care for to be taken in. So that's another way in which we get animals. But the vast majority are still coming from shelters including emergency shelters following disasters.
Yeah. What happens to an animal like a dog who gets hit by a car? What?
Very good question. If they come to us, they're in luck. I say that because we have a veterinary staff that can and just like in human care, not every veterinary facility is set up to handle emergencies. It's a special sort of equipment, a special kind of exam room and so on. But animals that are injured are going to get assessed and taken care of, at least in the interim, in a way that we can manage them so that we can do an evaluation and see if we can then help. Remember, if this is an animal that somebody brings to us and they don't know who the owner is, so we're first going to obviously be looking for, is there a tag? Is there a microchip? Is there a way to get in touch with people who can then, we can stabilize the animal and get the animal to them to go to their own veterinarian for care. But obviously we're not an agency that's going to put animals out because they don't have coverage. I'm saying that because with humans, we worry, it's like, I don't have coverage. I get to the ER, they're going to say, you're not covered, pal, and chuck me out the door. You actually can't do that by law. So it's similar attitude that we have. We will take care of them, get them stabilized, and see if we can help them and help with in the process, try and find out where their legal owners are and if we can get them reconnected.
Yeah. There a comment about the LaRussa family no longer being with ARF.
Yes. Well, let me just tell you, this was sort of came up out of nowhere, not through any formal releases from ARF. It was actually on social media, and it's one of the things that I right away said, I got wind of that. What's the story? And I was this morning and obviously in touch with our management group, who pointed out that our mission goes on. As of this morning, when I looked at you can do it too. When I looked online, Tony LaRussa is still the chairman and co-founder of the board. And so what's going on there is to be determined. I'm not in on it at this point. I'm a volunteer who's not even on the premises much these days, but we're going to continue focusing on rescuing animals and promoting this human-animal bond interaction and continuing with our adoption work and preparing, hopefully, to be welcoming the public back within the next month to be able to pursue our adoptions much more traditionally. So we continue to offer no contact adoptions in the meantime through our website. But as far as I know, we're going onward and upward, and you and I can follow on arflife.org and see what the bulletins are that come up about if there are going to be changes. But as of today, we're still in business.
Okay. How about COVID? How did COVID hit you guys? I mean, we all have our stories.
Yes.
You guys.
Ripples, you may remember, those of you who have dogs and cats, originally right away we were worrying about whether animals were part of the transmission chain, which we didn't know. It's like my dog has, we saw, there's some dogs have been diagnosed with COVID, and they're going to transmit it. So everything was in chaos mode, and what we had to do was dial back the interactions with the public. And that included, sad to say, most of the volunteers who were on site, like me. Most of what I was doing for ARF was on site. And so I'm meeting with you virtually rather than coming to maybe one of your luncheon gatherings, which I understand are spectacular. Keep me in mind for next year. But we had that opportunity for us to, so we had to figure out a way to do virtual adoptions using video of each of the animals available for adoption. People go online and do a quick outline of what they're looking for in the way of a pet. And we try and match them up and then have a no contact pickup with a sort of like with a set of guidelines that include take the animal home for a tryout. We actually, instead of spending time meeting them on site, we've had to have the families pre-screen, make sure we've got a pretty good matchup as far as we can tell. And the actual chemistry of the animal and the families has to be evaluated at their home. with the understanding that it's a tryout. Now, try telling a 5-year-old that this puppy is just a tryout, you know. But it's not easy to do. So we're looking forward to getting back to having our tryouts and our meetings at the facility, but that had to be postponed. As had obviously a big vector that we couldn't control was the volunteers coming and going all the time. So people like me, I haven't been there in a year. It's been that long. And we hope to have that back up and running soon and have our ribbon cutting for the new building and so on.
Thank you.
Paul, do you have
Very
any
interesting.
other questions? Do you have any other questions, Paul? We have time for probably one more. And
No, I think that's looking pretty good. I really appreciate all the stuff you've told us, and it's been great. Thank you very much, Stewart.
Great. Well, I'm very much impressed with your group. I listened to your banter. It sounds like you have way too much fun. And that's wonderful to hear that you're doing that in your retirement and taking on various kinds of projects that I know you're all involved with. So hats off to you as well. And thank you for letting me share your lunch hour.
extremely informative, Stewart. We all enjoyed it. And it's inspiring to know that these kinds of things are dealt with on a day-to-day basis, because, you know, sometimes you just don't hear about it.
That's true. And I would say it very much, it goes on all the time in the background. And thank you again for your interest and for our invitation. It's been a pleasure. Have a great day.
Thank you, Stewart.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Let's see.